Coming up next on Words and Numbers, Alzheimer's,
Massie's concession speech,
town councils,
and changing demographics.
Hi, I'm James.
And I'm Anthony.
And this is Words and Numbers.
So, Ant, I would ask what's new and exciting in your world this week, but I already know. I'm sitting in your house.
James is sitting in my house. Actually, you want to do something cool? Stay right there. Hi, everybody.
Hi, everybody. Hey, wait, come here.
What? Oh, stop it. Oh, God, you're so horrible.
Who doesn't like a surprise kiss?
So James has inflicted himself on me past few days.
With great love.
I want to talk about, now look, you've messed my hair. I was all nice for this video and everything. Listener David Mahone posted something interesting on Backstage. And I just want to hit this real quick because it's one of these things that I hadn't considered, but as soon as he said it, and David posted it came from Thomas Massie's concession speech. It's one of these things that when you hear it, you say, well, of course. This is what he says, Thomas Massie. If the legislative branch always votes with the president, then we have a king. If the legislative branch just votes whichever way the wind blows, then we have mob rule.
Hard to argue with that.
And so much, as I talk to people, I think the populace is starting to come to the realization that our root problem, whichever party happens to be in the White House, is Congress. For decades, Congress hasn't been doing its job.
Well, Congress, Ant, as we've said before a bunch of times, routinely has a much lower opinion rating than whoever the president is and however poor his rating happens to be. And it's usually kind of like, I mean, we've gotten used to now 38 to 41% approval rating on Donald Trump as president. That seems to be where he just falls. There's a bit of a floor, a bit of a ceiling, but he bounces between those numbers. Congress bounces between 18 and 21.
Oh, it's worse than that. I saw a Gallup poll just like 48 hours ago that had Congress like at 9.
I wouldn't, that is historically very low, but I wish I could say I'm surprised, and I don't think that's right. So I'm not surprised, and that probably is right. But the weird part is always the second part of this, where people don't really ever go. Yes, they have this dim view of Congress, very, very dim, but their own congressman, on the other hand, he's fine.
Mm-hmm. Right, yeah.
Right, so you're always left with this, and the reason why they typically like their own congressman is because they bring money back to the district. Mm-hmm. So exactly the problem that we face is caused by exactly the forces that we see obviously in play, and here we are.
Yep, everybody wants the budget cut, just not their particular thing.
Just not this one thing that I love more than everything else.
Yeah.
I've got some potentially better news, and there's a new Alzheimer's drug, and it might be effective more broadly for all types of dementia, that halts the disease before symptoms show.
Really?
And it's in stage 3 human trials.
Oh, wow. So it's on the verge of being released.
This could be a thing in the next year. And apparently it has the ability to just simply remove the plaque from the brain that is what Alzheimer's is. And and apparently it's overwhelmingly positive results. Alzheimer's may be a thing of the past very, very soon.
Boy, how about that?
Wouldn't that be something?
Huh.
But remember,
remember
the big pharma doesn't want to cure diseases. They want to keep you sick so they can keep selling you medicine.
Yeah. Very strange that in effect, there's a business out there that wants to kill its own customers. If this comes to be, this is going to be interesting. I can recall as a young child, Of course, a polio vaccine came out before I was born, but it was close enough that I can remember as a young kid, adults saying routinely, oh yeah, well, remember when people used to just die of polio and now all of a sudden it's gone, this scourge.
Yeah,
So
polio
too,
for our
Alzheimer's
generation.
could be the next big thing like that.
Polio for our generation, Ant, is kind of like death by car accident is now.
Yeah.
But was for our generation, right? Young people now have no idea what the horror of polio was. They just know it abstractly as a disease that got cured by actually not one but two vaccines. But when we were young, me and you, we all knew somebody who had had polio.
I knew one person.
I did too.
And that was an adult.
Yeah, it was a father of a friend of mine had polio, and he was fortunate enough to live through it. He was withered on one side of his body, not unlike if he had had a terrible stroke. But, you know, he was one of the lucky ones. He lived. And as a matter of fact, Aunt, I think it was just last week, the last person in an iron lung died.
Oh, really?
So,
wow.
You know, people really don't understand. When the polio vaccines were announced, there was literal, and I mean literal, dancing in the streets. Parents would say things like, now our children don't have to die.
Yep.
And now children will say things like, my parents don't have to be demented.
Yes.
And, you know, dementia is an interesting sort of thing, right? You don't get it until you live long enough to get it. And it took, you know, life expectancies growing to even realize this was a thing. Because everybody would have been dead by something else long before. But it might be a thing of the past, and it might be a thing of the past very, very soon. But that doesn't absolve us, Ant, from covering the foolishness of the week. And it was sent by a listener, if memory serves, and I can't remember who that listener was. I might have just found it online myself. But there is a wretched town called Avenel, and I don't know if I'm pronouncing that correctly. It could be Avenel, you know, in California, where the town voted its entire town council out of office, and they refused to leave.
Whoa.
How does that work? That's not how democracy works.
A, fascinating that the entire town council was voted out. B, fascinating that they just decide they're not going anywhere.
Yeah, and then there was one guy left, and at a city meeting, he nominated himself to be mayor. He then seconded his own nomination and declared himself mayor. I suspect you haven't heard the last of this. And there's, of course, as you might guess, an extraordinary backstory with spending of money and, you know, all these sorts of things. But they were functionally recalled from office, and they just decided, no, we're not.
Amazing.
So, yeah, what do you do next, I guess, is the question. But we'll all find that out later when it's a news item and not a foolishness. So what is it exactly that we were talking about this week? You told me last night, and now I can't remember.
Yeah, I want to talk broadly about the problem with population stagnation, and I want to get into the weeds downstream of some of the implications.
Okay.
And as you know, U.S. population continues to grow, but it's flattening out. Census anticipates that the U.S. population will max out at around 415 million or so, round about 2080, and then start to decline.
That's interesting because the great decline in China is going to be more than evident by 2100, give or take. So I guess that turn of the next century is starting to look problematic for people who understand demographics.
Yeah, it's starting to be, and China's going to have a way bigger problem than we have. You know, starting 2080, we're going to start to decline. It's not going to be a huge decline, but it's going to start to decline. China, by the end of the century, is anticipated to lose 40% of its population.
And that's by the official government numbers. So it's probably much, much worse than that.
Yeah, so and this is something all the developed countries are experiencing. It's new. I say it's new. I'll say this. It's new to the human race. Not that we've never had population decline, but the population decline has always been the result of war or pestilence or
Right.
drought.
This one's voluntary.
Yeah, this was voluntary. This is new stuff. And it seems to be, economists are still studying this, but it seems to be the case that as societies become more and more prosperous, they just stop having children. They have children at a much slower rate, and eventually they're below replacement. The big problem, of course, everybody knows, is Social Security. We already don't have enough people paying into Social Security for the people who are drawing out. That whole thing just gets worse on both ends, because on the one end, the retirees are living longer and longer. On the other end, we've got fewer and fewer children to be paying into the system. And so I don't want to make this episode about immigration, but there's a big footnote here that immigration now becomes ever more important, because if there is a simple solution to this problem, it's that.
Yeah, you're going to need more people for reasons that we'll cover soon enough, and that, should be immediately obvious when you think about Social Security. But, other countries have already faced this. Italy imports Turks left and right to do the jobs that nobody there does. And when you have a welfare state, I mean, look, a welfare state is always definitionally a Ponzi scheme, right? You need more people paying in than you have taking out. These things have to be so, or sooner or later, you'll have to cut the welfare benefits, as however you understand them, or your entire economy will crash, Venezuela style. And
Now,
this is just how it is.
Yeah, and all of that is true, and I think we've talked about that before. I want to go further downstream and talk about one of the things that's happening as a result of this population stagnation. And that is, you see it already, but it's going to become worse and worse, or let me say more pronounced. And that is states within the United States competing with each other for people.
Yeah.
And you get this already with people fleeing California, fleeing New York, fleeing Connecticut, going to Florida. There's a lot of migration amongst the states, so much so that if you look at population growth numbers for the individual states, they're driven far more by migration across states than they are by births within the state.
Yeah. Do we have any states right now? And look, I know people are leaving New England in droves. My former state of Connecticut is taxing people out of retirement in Connecticut, for example. California is making life difficult in terms of taxation. New York has had a traditional difficulty with this, as has Illinois, for that matter. Do we have any states right now that are experiencing negative population growth, so population decline?
Oh,
in
yes.
absolute terms.
Oh, yes. Oh, yeah. Yeah, California is one. Now, they have a positive net growth. They have a positive birth rate, but the out-migration dwarfs that, so they're losing people. There are other states, I think Idaho comes to mind. I had the picture in front of me, but I had to reboot my computer because it decided to update just 5 minutes before our conversation, so I don't have the graph.
Have fun
But
with Windows.
there are states that have positive natural birth rates, but overwhelming out-migration, like California. There are other ones, I think Nevada might be an example, of a negative natural birth rate, but such pronounced in-migration that their population is growing.
Yeah.
So it's all across the board.
I'm not surprised by Nevada, right? That's an attractive place if you're a young person looking to be able to afford something and
Right.
live near a functional city and, this sort of thing. I myself looked at Henderson, Nevada as a possible landing spot some years back. But I mean, this is interesting, right? Because we're already below replacement in terms of birth. And in order to maintain a population, you need every woman to average 2.1 children.
Right.
And we're not there.
No, we're not.
And so the real question is, how is our population still growing?
Well, it's growing, albeit at a slow rate, but it's growing because of immigration. If we completely shut the borders today, allowed nobody else in, we'd be declining right now.
And then we would have real problems emerging in real time. They would just, it would be like lighting a wick. Right.
Oh, right, yeah. And the problems start to snowball, right? Yeah,
very quickly, the thing would explode that you
and again, this comes back to my point of this is new territory for us. Particularly the United States, throughout our entire history, not only have we had population growth, we've had exponential population growth. We've never dealt with this thing that we're starting to have to deal with now. And people say things like, well, AI is going to make up for some of this, and it will make up for some of it. But eventually, even AI isn't going to do what you're looking for here.
AI is not going to pay Social Security taxes.
Right. Let me get down to the state level, because that's where things become very interesting. So forget about the U.S. as a whole. Talk about individual state populations. And what census already tells us is that the peak and decline in population doesn't occur uniformly across the U.S. It's going to be occurring first in the western states, then in the northeastern states, then in the midwestern states, and lastly in the southeastern. But the southeastern is projected to peak and decline so far into the future that it goes beyond what census currently projects. Now, I did a little bit of digging into the data. You and I have written in the past a number of articles in academia and op-eds on the relationship between economic freedom and socioeconomic outcomes. Income, poverty, unemployment, stuff like that.
So we obviously have had a bit of a technical difficulty.
My computer. I made the mistake of saying yes when Microsoft wanted to update my thing just 10 minutes before. I know better than to do that.
It serves you right for using Microsoft products. But anyway, here we are together as God and nature intended in the first place anyway.
Yeah, they both have questionable taste.
Well, look who's talking.
Here's the thing. We're talking about socioeconomic outcomes amongst the states. So here's what I'm doing. I wanted to step away from measures of economic freedom, because people who are skeptical, rightly so, have various questions about how these things are calculated, what they mean, and so forth. So here's what I did. I'm looking at state and local government spending as a fraction of GDP. That's it. I'm not asking what you're spending on, what your taxation is. I'm simply saying, what is the economic footprint? So each state has a certain economy. A certain slice of that is controlled, if you want to use that word, by state and local government. How big is that slice? And it ranges from, I think the low is 13%, maybe for Nevada, and the high is like 26%, I think, for New Mexico. But roughly speaking, that's where you're talking. Now, here's the fascinating thing. If you divide the states this way between, let's call them the 25 states that have the larger state and local government footprints and the 25 states that have the smaller state and local government footprints, you find average income, household income, adjusted for cost of living, is higher in those states with the smaller economic footprints, smaller government economic footprints. And you say, all right, well, fine, maybe income is higher, but maybe you're missing out on measuring things like, people who don't have jobs at all, right? Okay, well, you could look at unemployment. Unemployment is lower in the states with the smaller economic footprint. And you could push back there and say, okay, well, you've talked about income, you talk about unemployment, but the people who always get left behind in these numbers are the poor. Except poverty rates are lower in the states with the smaller state and local government footprints.
So it's almost as if we should learn something from this.
Yeah. Now, the astute listener will say, well, something's got to give, right? And maybe the thing that gives is income inequality. That, you have the smaller government footprint, and of course, you've got the rich people who can take more advantage and earn more money and whatever it is, except that income inequality is lower when the state and local government footprint is smaller.
All right, but here's the thing. We're talking about birth rates and...
Yes, and that's where the rest of this fits in. It turns out that Americans are migrating, on average, out of states that have the larger government footprints and into states that have the smaller government footprints.
Yeah, and that's actually two things. It's interesting and predictable.
Yeah, right.
And
right.
the weird thing is I've somehow become your outline.
Oh, you have, yeah.
That's right. I'm just here to say what comes next.
Right.
That's right. But it would seem that this would be in the category of the bleeding obvious, and we should probably not have to say it out loud, and yet here we are having to say it out loud.
And I point to this kind of thing when people say things like, well, but we need more government because people's incomes aren't high enough, or there's too many unemployed, or we have to do something about poverty, or we have to flatten out inequality. And you look at the numbers and it actually goes the other direction. And this is not surprising. We've seen the stuff that we've written. We have looked at states in the United States across time. So this is not just a today thing. It's persisted for decades. We've looked at countries on planet Earth. You see the same phenomenon over and over again, no matter how you slice the data, no matter what you look at.
And it's strange. When we did the previous work, and I don't know if you even want to bother talking about this today necessarily, but when we did the previous work, we found that in countries that had a smaller governmental footprint, the environment was healthier.
Yes,
the physical environment,
yes, right?
And that child labor didn't exist to the same degree. And the natural reaction people typically have is, well, if the environment is in trouble, we should have a heavy government intervention. But it turns out it's not that the opposite is true, but it is true that a lighter intervention makes a better difference.
Yeah, and I think that's an important thing. Don't take away from any of this the conclusion that, well, we should have no government at all.
That's right.
Because there's a sweet spot, no doubt. And I think what happens is most of the governments you look at tend to be on one side of that sweet spot.
Yeah.
We don't find many on the opposite side.
No, to find the ones on the other side, you generally have to find brand new governments in relatively young countries.
Right, or ones that have failed.
And then they grow if they're successful, meaning they can retain power.
Mm-hmm.
Not that they do good things, but
right.
that they can retain
right.
power. Then they grow and grow and grow and grow.
Mm-hmm.
But notice that the government growth is more to do with holding power than it is with achieving positive results.
Yeah, that's
and you can make an argument that in order to hold power, you must achieve some level of positive result, and that's generally true. And I'm going to give that one to you generally, but I'm going to point to North Korea.
Mm-hmm. Right,
you can maintain a regime that does absolutely nothing good for its own people, as long as you keep them terrified enough not to do anything bad.
Yeah, except you and I know that's unstable.
Yeah.
It is destined to fail. The question is when, not if.
Well, that's right. That's right. It is going to fail. But every country on the face of the earth right now is going to fail.
Well, yeah, but I guess the question is fail in what way?
In what way?
I could see, we've talked about before, at some point the U.S. federal government becoming so large and so indebted that it falls apart.
Mm-hmm.
But I don't see that falling apart. Well, I would tend to think it's probably inevitable and possibly on the order of centuries, but I would say inevitable. But I wouldn't see that falling apart as one of economic, Armageddon or anything. It would simply be, I would imagine, very similar to Brexit.
I would compare it instead to the dissolution of the Soviet Union,
Really?
where a number of countries just regained their independence.
Mhm.
And they
Without bloodshed.
without
Okay.
yeah.
Yeah.
Something more like that.
Hmm.
I mean, the analog isn't clear, right? That was a political and economic. Well, maybe it is pretty clear. Maybe it is a good example.
Didn't
But
that kind of happen by accident?
it was falling apart internally.
Right.
The end of the story was kind of accidental. A guard misread a memo that he got about allowing people through the Berlin Wall,
Right.
and he just opened the door, and
Can you imagine a typo?
yeah, and everybody just kind of flooded on through,
Yeah.
and before you know it, the guards up top that you can't shoot everybody.
Right. Right.
Come to find out, and nor do you really want to.
Mhm.
They're human beings too. And yeah, so, one thing leads to another. People forget that there was a coup at one point very late in the day, just like there is probably going to be another coup in Russia at some point in the not too distant future. I don't think Vladimir Putin has much longer to live or control that country, but yeah, that's for another day. The interesting takeaway here is that we've got two phenomena at work at the same moment, right? We've got insufficient birth rates to maintain our population, and then we've got our natural reticence towards immigration, which I think is reasonable. And Milton Friedman said this, and I'll say it too, having open immigration in a welfare state is a prescription for disaster. If you want open immigration, great. I could see my way to that. Remove the welfare state. If you want the welfare state, well, okay, I'm not as thrilled with that, but I get it. Restrict immigration. But you can't just open up both spigots and hope that...
I think the problem there is we as a country haven't had a serious discussion of what's the right level of immigration. So we end up going back and forth between the two extremes. Let everybody in and let nobody in.
And we've made a system so ridiculous that nobody can follow the rules.
Right.
I mean, it's Byzantine. So we've got this problem on the one hand, right? The problem of population. But then we've got this other phenomenon of population moving from one kind of state to another kind of state, which is going to leave, in your example, 25, but in reality, probably 8 or 10 states in real trouble.
Yeah.
Real trouble. And Illinois has been in real trouble for a decade, right? They can't get their act together to save their lives over there. But New York is going to be next, I think.
New York, Connecticut, we already saw. We've talked about
Connecticut's a disaster.
5-10 years ago of Connecticut tried to claw back the state pensions for retired state workers if they left.
Who had the nerve to leave.
Right, yeah.
The nerve to leave. And Connecticut is quite terrible. My father's retired there. Hey, Pop, how you doing? He's undoubtedly watching. And he's retired there, and it's very difficult to retire to Connecticut. The cost of living and the cost of taxation are so high that if you don't have a growing income, sooner or later you're going to be priced out of your own house.
Right.
And that's the reality they all face. And
but
herein
lies something interesting. Already we're seeing Americans moving from the states that have the bigger government footprint to states that have the smaller government footprint. And a couple of interesting things emerge. One, the rural states tend to have smaller government footprints. One. Two, combine that, think about that in light of the rise of remote work. And all of a sudden, you've got the ability now, you could have a high-paying job in a more urban state, move to the rural state, you keep your high-paying job, you have the low cost of living and all the other benefits that come with the small government state.
Yeah, I have thought many times about maybe I should just move to Kentucky or something. Right?
You're right, yeah.
Where land is cheaper, not cheap by any stretch, but cheaper.
But do you know something interesting that comes out of the data? It's starting to mess with our GDP data.
Of course it is.
Because GDP is measured by the production of the companies that are producing. If I live in Oklahoma and work remotely for a business that's located in Virginia, all of my production counts toward Virginia's GDP, not Oklahoma's.
Right, but you spend all your money in Oklahoma.
Right, it should count. Right, you would think it should count for Oklahoma, but the way the numbers come out, it counts for Virginia.
And this is one of those vagaries of statistics, right? You have to measure something.
Right.
It could go either way and make perfect sense, and it went this way, which means now we'll never fully understand the other way.
Right, yeah.
And that's life. But look, we have countervailing trends here, and they're not going to be helpful to us.
Well,
we're going to have a problem.
I think they could be helpful if politicians and voters
Took
a deep breath. Wait a minute.
Do you hear the foolishness you just said? If voters and politicians ...
Well, but see, this is the beautiful thing. People understand the benefit of competition in the marketplace. What we're talking about now is competition in the political space. And as long as you have free and open borders, and I'm talking about within the United States, you can move from one state to another. As long as you have that, you force the state governments to compete with each other.
Yeah. The only problem is it takes a generation or two before they realize what's happening.
Possibly.
In Connecticut, they are not wandering around in Connecticut, in Hartford, saying, we best finally get rid of this income tax that we instituted on top of our 8% or whatever it is, sales tax on top of this and that and this and that. They're not saying that. They're saying, how can we force people to stay?
Right. How can we force them to stay? Or barring that, we need to do more. We need to raise taxes even further to make up for the people who just left.
That's right.
Missing the point of why they left in the first place.
That's right. So breed, I guess, is the answer for if you're a patriot, you must breed more. So somehow I just became J.D. Vance.
I had 6 kids.
Just like you did. I had 3, and that's too many too. But in light of this, be nice to each other. Things are falling apart. It's going to be a hell of a show coming down the final
It's
road.
not that bad.
Yes, it is. It's worse than you think.
I think it's a lot better than you think.
I think we're all going to hell in a handcart. But until that actually happens, be nice to each other, and we'll see you next time with a special guest.
Yes.
Bye, everybody.